The night had never felt this heavy. Clara sat in her childhood bedroom, the storm outside rattling the windows while the rest of the house had gone completely still. The electricity had failed hours ago, and all that remained was a single candle burning faintly on her nightstand. Its fragile light threw long broken shadows across the walls, shadows that seemed to lean closer each time she blinked. Her grandmother's warning echoed in her head, "Never let the dark come before the flame dies, Clara. The dark listens. The dark waits." As a child, Clara had rolled her eyes at the old woman's tales, dismissing them as bedtime superstitions. But tonight she couldn't ignore the weight of those words. The candle sputtered, the wax dripping down in uneven lines. Clara wrapped her blanket tighter around her shoulders, her breath shallow, every creak in the house amplified in the silence. She tried reading the tattered book on her lap to distract herself, but her eyes kept darting to the corners of the room, the places where the candlelight struggled to reach. That was when she noticed it. The flame bent sharply, though there was no wind. The windows were shut, and the storm outside couldn't possibly reach her here. Still, the light seemed to recoil, shrinking as though something unseen had leaned too close. Clara's pulse quickened. She whispered to herself, "It's nothing. Just nerves." But then she heard it. A whisper, soft and sibilant, curling through the silence like smoke. "Clara?" Her throat tightened. The voice wasn't loud, but it was there, sliding along the walls, seeping into her bones. She sat frozen, eyes locked on the far corner of the room. For a moment she thought she saw something. A darker patch within the dark, taller than any shadow should be, its edges wavering like smoke trying to take form. She blinked and it was gone. Her heart raced as she clutched the candle, shielding it with her hands. The flame wavered again, almost bowing to some unseen breath. She could feel her grandmother's words clawing back to her, urgent now, not just memory but warning. As long as the candle burns, the dark can't take shape. Clara swallowed hard. The wax had nearly reached the base. She had no other candles, no matches, nothing to keep the light alive once it went out. And somewhere in the silence, the whisper came again, closer this time. "It's almost time." Evelyn's scream never left her throat, it was smothered by a suffocating silence. The flame had gone out, but the darkness wasn't empty. Moved. She could feel it pressing against her skin, brushing her face as though invisible hands were testing her, curious if she was still alive. Her trembling fingers scrambled for the box of matches. She struck one, the sudden spark flaring bright, painting the room in desperate orange. The shadows hissed back, retreating like water evaporating in fire. She lit another candle, clutching it as though it were her only anchor to the living world. For a moment the room looked normal again. The furniture, her bookshelves, the window with its rain-streaked glass, they were all as they should be. But Evelyn's heart refused to slow. In that split second of pure darkness she had seen something. Not with her eyes but with her mind, a figure standing in the farthest corner of the room. Its body wasn't shaped like a person, but more like a cluster of twisted limbs pulled from the shadows themselves. Its eyes had been two pale embers, glowing faintly in the black. Evelyn shivered. She couldn't bring herself to look at the corner now, not even with the candle burning. The light didn't reach far enough, and she was terrified of what she might confirm if she looked too long. The house seemed to respond to her fear. The wooden beams groaned, the window rattled as though something pressed against it from outside. Evelyn held the candle higher, trying to steady her breath. The flame flickered violently, though there was no draft. Then she heard it. A sound so faint she wondered if she had imagined it, breathing. Slow, heavy, deliberate. It wasn't hers. It came from the direction of the corner. Evelyn's stomach knotted. Her mind screamed to run, to flee the room and burst into the storm outside if she had to. But her legs betrayed her, rooted in place. All she could do was stare at the tiny flame that stood between her and a suffocating abyss. The breathing grew louder. Closer. Her hand shook so violently the wax dripped onto her skin, burning her. She yelped, nearly dropping the candle, and that was when she realized she hadn't closed the bedroom door. And now, in the faint quiver of the flame, she saw it creak open wider. Something darker than the night itself began to slide through the crack. The door groaned wider, inch by inch, though no hand pushed it. Evelyn clutched the candle tighter, her knuckles white against the brass holder. The flame wavered, spitting droplets of melted wax onto the wooden floor. The shadow slipped into the room. Not like a figure stepping across a threshold, but like a spill of liquid black that dragged itself forward. It clung to the walls, the ceiling, crawling in shapes too wrong for human eyes. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs so hard she feared it might extinguish the flame by the sheer force of her terror. She stumbled backward, almost tripping over her chair. "Stay back," she whispered, her voice breaking. Stay away." The shadow froze. For one long, unbearable second, the only sound was the storm outside and Evelyn's ragged breathing. Then, from within the darkness, a voice slithered through the air. "You cannot keep it lit forever." Evelyn's throat dried instantly. The voice was neither male nor female, it was the hiss of burning wood, the scrape of nails against stone. She shook her head violently. "You're not real. You're not here." But the voice only laughed, a hollow echo that vibrated in her bones. The candle flame shrank suddenly as if the air had thickened around it. Evelyn panicked, holding it close to her chest, but the light flickered weakly, as though suffocated by the very presence of what stood before her. She backed toward the bed, her knees trembling. On the dresser, the matchbox lay just out of reach. She thought of running for it, but the shadow seemed to know. It began to stretch across the room, black tendrils unfurling along the floor, inching toward the dresser as if to block her escape. "Why me?" she whispered. Her lips trembled. "What do you want from me?" The shadow stirred, its pale ember eyes glowing brighter. "When the last candle dies," it breathed, "you are mine." Her stomach twisted. That was why it waited. Why it hadn't lunged yet. It wasn't hunting her, it was counting down, savoring the inevitability of her fear. Her grip tightened on the candle. She forced herself to breathe, to think. If it fed on the darkness, then the flame was her only weapon. But she had only 2 candles left. The storm outside thundered, shaking the house. The window rattled violently, and for a moment, Evelyn thought she saw more shadows pressing against the glass, eager, waiting. Her only light trembled, threatened to die. And then, somewhere deep in the house, she heard another sound. A second candle being lit. Evelyn froze. The sound was unmistakable, the sharp rasp of a match striking, the soft whoosh of fire taking breath. Somewhere in the house, another flame had come alive. But she was alone. She had been alone all night. Her candle guttered, barely clinging to its wick, but the new glow seemed to ripple faintly under the door at the end of the hall. A warm orange flicker, too steady, too deliberate. The shadow retreated slightly, hissing in a sound like retreating steam. Its ember eyes dimmed, watching. Almost as if it too had not expected the light. Evelyn's chest tightened. Her fears shifted into confusion, laced with a dangerous thread of hope. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice cracking. No answer. Only the faint pop of wax melting somewhere beyond. Gathering her courage, Evelyn edged toward the hall. The shadows pressed along the walls, writhing like snakes in the corners, but they didn't block her path. They seemed to recoil, almost wary. She stepped into the hallway, clutching her dwindling flame, and followed the distant glow. The storm outside battered the windows. Rain pounded like fists against glass, lightning flashing through the curtains. Each bolt illuminated the crooked family portraits on the wall, faces of ancestors long dead, their painted eyes glinting with suspicion. At the far end of the corridor stood a single candle on the floor. Its flame was strong, steady, untouched by draft or fear. Evelyn stared at it, her breath catching in her throat. The matchbox from her dresser lay beside it. Her mind raced. Had she placed it there without remembering? Sleepwalking? No, she had never left her room. And yet the evidence sat before her, undeniable. Slowly she bent to pick up the candle. As her hand hovered near the flame, the air grew heavy, thick with the smell of smoke and damp earth. The shadow behind her whispered, "Closer now." "Not yours." Evelyn jerked her hand back. The candle's flame flickered, and bent toward her like it was alive, reaching. Her skin prickled, her instincts screaming to run, but she couldn't move. She could only stare as the fire stretched impossibly high, twisting into a form. A figure emerged from the flame. A woman's outline, flickering, her hair made of smoke, her eyes burning like coals. She opened her mouth, and when she spoke, her voice cracked like dry wood in a fire. "Evelyn." The sound of her own name, spoken in that scorched whisper, ripped the strength from Evelyn's legs. She stumbled back, nearly dropping her candle. Because she recognized the voice. It was her mother's. But her mother had been dead for years. Evelyn's lips trembled as the fiery apparition of her mother loomed before her, twisting within the candle's glow. The figure's face was both familiar and distorted, as though painted on smoke that curled and warped with each breath of flame. "Mother?" Evelyn whispered, her voice fragile. The apparition smiled, though the sight brought no comfort. Fire cracked across her cheeks like splitting wood. "The last candle," it rasped. "It was never meant for warmth, never for safety. Evelyn clutched her dwindling candle tighter, its wick now a mere glowing thread. Her heart hammered as the shadow behind her surged, circling like a predator. It hissed at the fiery form, recoiling, but it did not flee. It was waiting. Her mother's burning figure extended a hand of smoke and fire. When the final flame dies, Evelyn, the house will take you. As it took me. As it takes us all. The word struck like a blow. Evelyn's knees buckled, her breath ragged. You died in this house. The figure nodded, ember eyes weeping trails of ash. And so will you. Unless you give it what it craves. The shadow surged forward at those words, swelling, blotting out the hallway's corners with inky black. Its voice slithered through the walls. Light or life? Evelyn felt her candle sputter, its flame wavering, dancing on the edge of nothing. Panic clawed at her chest. She thought of running, but where? Every window, every door sealed in storm and shadow. The only light was here, the false hope of the second flame and the dying breath of her own. Her mother's fiery face leaned closer, whispering with urgency. It will never stop. Each generation feeds it. That is the curse of this place. Someone must burn, so another may live. The shadow struck like a wave, snuffing at Evelyn's candle. She screamed and shielded it, her fingers blistering from the heat. The wick flared weakly, then steadied. And she realized. The house had not claimed her yet. It wanted her choice. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at the second candle, burning steady and strong, waiting like a sacrifice already prepared. If she extinguished hers, the house would swallow her whole. If she fed it another flame, another soul, it might spare her. The shadow whispered again, choose. With shaking hands, Evelyn reached for the second candle. She hesitated, staring into the fiery eyes of her mother. You want me to give it someone else? Her mother's smile widened, cruel and broken. Only then will you escape. Evelyn snuffed the second flame with trembling breath. The house roared. The shadow screamed. And her mother's fiery figure vanished, torn away like smoke in wind. Evelyn collapsed to the floor, her own candle still burning, a fragile sliver of light. She was alive. But she was not free. Because in the silence that followed, she understood the curse. The last candle had burned out, not tonight. But one night soon it would. And when it did, she would not escape again.